stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisperer in Darkness. I'm your host, the manfromleng. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, I am reviewing the Survivor cards from Before the Black Throne, the final Mythos pack in the Circle Undone cycle. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Before I get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support. The Arkham Horror LCG community is amazing, and these people have gone above and beyond to bring you the content like these reviews. If you'd like to become a patron to support the channel's goals and see your name in lights, follow the link down below, sign up for a tier of your choice, and claim your rewards. That would be awesome. Without further ado, let's get started. The first Survivor card in the pack is the level 2 version of Lure. It's a one-cost event that costs 2 experience points. It has 2 agility skill icons and the trick trait. It has the following game text: attached to your location or to a connecting location. During the enemy phase, each enemy that moves does so along the shortest path towards the attached location, instead of to where it would normally move. Forced, while attached, at the end of the round, discard Lure. Lure 1 is not a very good card. In fact, if asked to pick the worst card in the Dunwich Legacy cycle, much less the game, I'd usually point to poor old Lure 1 as my choice. However, Fantasy Flight Games released Telescopic Sight in Union and Disillusion, and I think that card is even worse than Lure 1. So now I've got a new whipping boy when I want to rant about bad cards. What makes Lure 1 such a bad card? Well, the cons of playing this card far outweigh the pros. First, the opportunity cost is very high. If Lure 1 is going to have any effect at all, there needs to be at least one ready enemy on the table that is going to move during the enemy phase. Typically, that's an enemy with the Hunter keyword, although there is at least one exception. Depending on the scenario, that can be a very high bar to clear. Once you've satisfied that criteria, you may take an action to play Lure 1 on your location, with a heavy emphasis on the your. Lure 1 would have been fine if you could lure enemies away from you, but nope, the enemy is going to move to your location if able. The value of this movement depends a lot on the board state and the position of the locations. If the enemy is too far away or too close to you, then the lure is likely wasted. The enemy was going to move toward you anyway. Presumably, you're playing Lure 1 to escape the enemy, so playing a card that brings an enemy closer to you is probably a bad idea in the long run. Another problem with Lure 1 is that you must take an action to attach it to your location. If you're playing Lure 1 to prevent an enemy from attacking you this round, then Lure 1 actually costs you 2 actions, one to play the lure and the second to move to a different location. Now, you can work around taking this second move action by playing fast cards such as Elusive or Shortcut, or playing cards with free triggered abilities such as Pathfinder. However, you've also got to consider that moving away from your current location may not be in your best interests. Spending 2 actions and or forcing yourself out of position to prevent an attack may not be a very wise strategy, especially if there are still clues that you would like to discover on the location you're vacating. The fourth problem with Lure 1 is that it's discarded at the end of the round. It would be great if Lure remained in play until an enemy reached the location in question, but no. You must spend 1, possibly 2 of your precious actions to play Lure and move, and then you end up discarding it at the end of the round, regardless of whether it achieved anything. What a waste. Now, I can think of a few good things to say about Lure 1. First, Lure affects non-elite and elite enemies. There are some extremely dangerous elite enemies that move, so having the option to lure them as well as their non-elite counterparts is a big plus. Second, Lure 1 has 2 agility skill icons, which is helpful during those scenarios where there are no enemies that move. Third, Lure 1 is an event, which means Wendy Adams may use her amulet to replay Lure 1 repeatedly. While that's certainly a possibility to employ this strategy, I can't help but feel there are far better events out there than Lure 1 for Wendy to abuse with her amulet. Fourth, Lure can be helpful if an investigator gets backed into a corner and really needs to find a way out. If you're playing the Midnight Masks, for example, you can end up trapped by an enemy in the Miskatonic University St. Mary's Hospital Southside Triangle. If your investigator is located at Southside and say a Night Gaunt is at Miskatonic University, the Night Gaunt will get you unless you're able to double move to Eastside. However, if you drop Lure 1 on Southside, you can guarantee that the Night Gaunt will move there, giving you a chance to move to Rivertown or St. Mary's Hospital hassle-free. This type of situation also pops up in extracurricular activity if you happen to get trapped by an enemy with the Hunter keyword in the Miskatonic Quad Humanities Building or in Library Triangle. The Wages of Sin scenario from the Circle Undone campaign features 2 such triangles in its location layout. I'm sure there are other scenarios where this type of situation occurs, but you've got to ask yourself if it's really worth spending 1 experience, much less a card and 2 actions, just in case you run into it. Personally, I'm not buying it. Another way to use Lure is to pin down enemies with the Aloof and Hunter keywords, such as Whippoorwills. If you get trapped in a Whipper Whirlpool by a couple of these nasty birds, you can drop Lure on your location and then move away. The Whippoorwills will stay at the location with the lure attached, giving you a chance to put some distance between them and yourself. There are a couple of very corner case situations where lure may be useful. The hunting horror in the Miskatonic Museum has a special ability that will ready it at the beginning of the enemy phase, even if you evaded it on your turn. The hunting horror does have the hunter keyword, so it will give chase if it readies. If you evade the hunting horror, play lure on its location, and then move, the hunting horror will stay put if that special ability happens to trigger. Like I said, it's a pretty corner case situation. Finally, I believe you may also use lure to control the movements of the broods of YOG-SOTHOTH in Undimensioned and Unseen. The broods' random movement can make it difficult to deal with them on your terms. Sometimes you need to spend an action to move to their location, which doesn't leave you with much room for error when you attack them. If you play lure, the broods will move toward you, potentially saving you some time tracking them down yourself. The broods move at the end of the enemy phase, which means they will not attack you if they do happen to reach the lure when they move. Lure 2 has the same game text as Lure 1 with one important exception. You may attach it to a connecting location. Lure 2 still isn't great, but it's a lot more versatile than its level 1 counterpart. If an enemy with the hunter keyword is knocking at your doorstep, you can drop the lure on its location, preventing it from moving for a turn. If there's an enemy with the aloof and hunter keywords at your location, you could play the lure on one location and then move to another, putting at least one location between the two of you. And if you're caught in that triangle I spoke of earlier, you could drop lure at one of the other 2 locations, giving you a little more time to wrap up your investigation at your location before you move on. Lure 2 is a better card than Lure 1, but it's still pretty corner case, and more than likely a low priority purchase for survivors. There are a few scenarios where it will work wonders, and many others where you will commit it to a skill test for the 2 agility skill icons. I can understand why Lure 2 was released during the Circle Undone cycle. Locations in the Circle Undone scenarios tend to be very compressed, which makes it difficult to avoid hunters. You certainly can't run them in circles like you can in a scenario such as the Midnight Masks or a Phantom of Truth. Lure 2 lets you drop the lure on the hunter's location, pinning them down for a turn. You could use it to buy yourself a turn against Brown Jenkin in the Secret Name or the Spectral Watcher in the Wages of Sin, but that's all you're getting is just that one turn, so you'd better make the most of it. The second survivor card in the pack is YOG-Catastrophe. It's a 2-cost event that costs 3 experience points. It has 2 wild skill icons and the Fortune and Blessed traits. It's fast, and it has the following game text. Play when you reveal a chaos token that would reduce your skill value to 0 during a skill test, including the auto-fail token. Cancel that token and treat it as an Elder Sign token instead. The first question I had when I saw this card is, what on earth is a YOG-Catastrophe? Well, it's a happy ending. No, not that type of happy ending, the fairy tale kind, which are few and far between in the Arkham Horror LCG. YOG-Catastrophe is noteworthy for a couple of reasons. First, it has 2 wild skill icons, which is great. Second, it has the Blessed trait, which means it is one of the rare out-of-class cards available to Father Mateo. Mateo can even start a campaign with a copy of YOG-Catastrophe in his deck if he wants. Third, and perhaps most importantly, YOG-Catastrophe is one of only 3 cards in the game that lets you cancel the Tentacle. That is the dreaded auto-fail token. There are plenty of cards that let you draw additional Chaos tokens during a skill test. These types of cards all but remove the threat of dealing with the Tentacle, but they don't necessarily guarantee success either. Other cards such as Will to Survive prevent you from revealing Chaos tokens during skill tests, which in turn prevents you from revealing the Tentacle. Seal of the Seventh Sign from Shattered Aeons lets you seal the Tentacle, at least temporarily removing it from the Chaos bag, but none of these cards will cancel the Tentacle outright. To do that, you need to be either playing Father Mateo, whose special ability lets him cancel the Tentacle once per game, or Wendy Adams, who may cancel the Tentacle by discarding a card. Wendy's reprieve from the Tentacle is only temporary, though, since she does have to reveal another token from the Chaos bag, which could be that very same Tentacle. YOG-Catastrophe is actually slightly better than cards that reveal an additional token or Father Mateo's ability, since it deals not only with the Tentacle, but also any other Chaos token that causes you to automatically fail a skill test, such as the tablet in certain scenarios in the Forgotten Age. Automatically failing a skill test means the investigator's skill value for that test is considered to be 0, so any token that causes an automatic failure is a fair game for YOG-Catastrophe. If you draw a token that would reduce your skill value to 0 or cause you to automatically fail, YOG-Catastrophe lets you treat that token as an Elder Sign. That's a very good ability for investigators in general. It's even better for investigators with powerful Elder Sign abilities, such as Ashcan Pete, who gets to Ready Duke, Patrice Hathaway from the Dream Eaters, who may reshuffle all but one card from her discard pile back into her deck, Wendy Adams, who automatically succeeds if her amulet is in play, William York, who gets to return a card from his discard pile to his hand, including YOG-Catastrophe, I might add, or Father Mateo, who may draw a card and gain a resource to take an additional action if it's his turn. It's worth noting that treating the token as an Elder Sign doesn't necessarily guarantee that you will succeed at the skill test unless you're playing Father Mateo or Wendy in combination with her amulet. Ashcan Pete and William York, for example, receive a +2 bonus when they draw an Elder Sign. That should be enough to succeed most of the time if they are 1 or 2 down before the pull, but I can think of a few situations when it won't be enough to bridge the gap. For example, if they're under the effects of Whippoorwills or Racked, that somehow reduces their base skill value. YOG-Catastrophe is good, but it's not a panacea against failure, since you may only play it if your skill value is reduced by 0 after you reveal a token. If your skill value is 4, the difficulty of the skill test is 3, and you reveal a -2 or -3, you're still going to fail the skill test, and you won't be able to play YOG-Catastrophe since the token didn't reduce your skill value to 0. The same is true if your skill value is 1, the skill difficulty is 2, and you pull a 0. YOG-Catastrophe seems slightly better on Hard or Expert difficulty, where there are some truly nasty Chaos tokens floating around in the bag that could easily reduce skill values ranging from 6 to 8 to 0 in one fell swoop. I quite like YOG-Catastrophe. It's one of the few cards in the game that straight up counters auto failure. It's a good choice for investigators with very low skill values in certain stats, since those stats are more likely to be reduced to 0 by run-of-the-mill -1s, -2s, and -3s. YOG-Catastrophe is also an event, so Wendy could play it with her amulet, shoring up her already impressive token cancellation abilities. If you're planning on playing YOG-Catastrophe, it's worth paying attention to your investigator's Elder Sign bonus, so you can judge exactly where you need to be before you reveal a token. You'd hate to have your skill value reduced to 0 only to discover the Elder Sign wasn't quite enough to guarantee success. That's going to do it for my review of the Survivor cards in Before the Black Throne. Lure 2 is better than Lure 1, but Lure 1 was pretty bad to begin with, so that's not saying very much. While Lure 2 has its uses, I don't expect the card to see a surge in popularity. The card is still fairly corner case, and most survivors will find plenty of other cards to purchase with their hard-earned experience points before this one. One of those cards is YOG-Catastrophe. There are very few ways to protect yourself against auto-failure in the Arkham Horror LCG, and YOG-Catastrophe is one of them that's available to all investigators. who can play it. If you don't automatically fail a skill test, YOG-Catastrophe can still bail you out if you have a low skill value and run into a run-of-the-mill -1 or -2. And the ability to treat the revealed token as an Elder Sign synergizes nicely with Father Mateo and many of the other Survivor investigators who have powerful Elder Sign abilities. All in all, the Circle Undone cycle featured some great player cards for every class. One of those, Drawing Thin, has already landed on the optional list of taboos in the most recent FAQ, adding 3 experience points to include it in your deck. There were relatively few stinkers this cycle. It is safe to say I won't be playing Telescopic Sight or Henry Wan anytime soon. Personally, I was very excited about a lot of the additions to the Mystic class and spent a better part of the cycle playing Mystic Investigators, including Diana Stanley and Marie Lambeau. The addition of the bonded cards toward the end of the cycle heralded the arrival of the Dream Eaters, which features several bonded cards that take the design in new directions. I haven't decided which class will be my quote-unquote pet class during the Dream Eaters, but I suspect I'll be playing a lot of Patrice Hathaway, who has one of the most interesting special abilities of the investigators in the box. I'm looking forward to jumping in to this expansion with both feet once my cards arrive later this week. That's going to do it for this review. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromleng@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromleng. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your Elder Sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.